everyone on the GIAC, and so I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to listen to this. As you know, about a year and a half ago or so, the commissioner and Dr. Paredes and the deputy commissioner, Dr. Gardner, and I started having some conversations about creating a strategic plan for graduate education in Texas to complement the higher education strategic plan. And from the outset of that, we very much wanted to involve the Graduate Education Advisory Committee, but we have also asked the RAND Corporation to help us a lot with this endeavor. They did a study for us on workforce in general that particularly focused on bachelor's degrees and provided us, and I think in the future we'll be able to in turn provide a lot of good information to institutions on programs. And so what we're trying to figure out is what do we need in the future and where do we need it? And so we've asked them to conduct a study for us again. And so I'd like to introduce Dr. Charles Goldman and Dr. Rita Karam, who've come to us from the RAND Corporation. And what we'll do is they will give a little brief presentation, 10 or 15 minutes, on the sort of the basic outline of the study and where we hope to go with it. And so if you would all mute your devices until after the presentation, and then we'll go into a discussion and question and answer period. So Dr. Goldman.
Thank you, Dr. Peebles. Rita and I are very pleased to be with you here today, and we're looking forward to telling you about the study and to hearing your thoughts, comments, questions about the approach to the study. You certainly know, since this is your committee, that graduate education is a very significant enterprise in the state of Texas. We've looked at the coordinating board data, and we found that public universities and health-related institutions have about 2,300 graduate programs spanning master's, doctoral, and professional programs, and that last year your institutions awarded 44,000 graduate professional degrees. In fact, in the past 10 years, the number of degree awards has grown by 40%, so that's pretty strong growth. Also, over the past 10 years, there were 494 new graduate programs proposed, and of those, 403 were approved. Universities also closed and consolidated about 400 or so programs, leaving you with a similar number of programs over the 10 years, despite the 40% increase in awards. We are, as Dr. Peebles said, we're conducting this study in support of strategic planning in the state of Texas. The state has just adopted the 60 by 30 strategic plan covering 2015 to 2030. That strategic plan targets an overall 80% increase in degrees and certificates being awarded by Texas institutions. And although there's not yet a specific target for graduate education within that, we can certainly expect a target of a very substantial increase over the 15-year period. And so that naturally calls for some strategic thinking about where, in what fields, and how is the state of Texas going to grow graduate education to meet future needs in the state. And we're looking forward to working closely with your committee to help do that. We see our study as a set of analyses that will ultimately help you as you work toward that strategic plan. The study has three objectives. The first is to assess the need to expand graduate programs at higher education institutions in Texas. The second is to provide guidance to the coordinating board and to the institutions on how to prepare and evaluate program proposals. And the third objective is to analyze policies that can manage the needed expansion of graduate programs in Texas. The study is organized into 6 tasks that support those objectives. And if you're watching us on video, you can see the 6 tasks on the screen. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dr. Karam to brief us quickly on our approach to these tasks.
Thank you. So these 6 research activities are interrelated, and are central to the study in order to meet.
I'm sorry, this is Sunny. Would you mind increasing the volume? I can't quite hear you.
Is there a
You
way?
might have to put,
Just pull it closer to you.
Oh,
put it
oh,
right,
just
yeah, put it right here on your,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
Sometimes on the phone especially, it's hard.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah,
Yes,
probably-
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. So as Charles said, there will be 6 related research activities that are core to the study in order to meet the 3 objectives. We will first begin by reviewing the coordinating board's inventory of the graduate programs and the criteria used to classify the programs. We will also interview state and higher education system stakeholders to understand the graduate programs, as well as identify the criteria used in their approval and review process and the evaluation process. Based on this information, we will develop criteria that describes different aims and markets for graduate programs. In addition, we will examine graduate program expansion policies in three states that are similar to Texas in terms of size, keeping in mind that the higher education system in Texas is structured differently. Those states would be California, Florida, and New York. We will interview stakeholders representing the states and the higher education systems to gain understanding about the mechanisms, as well as the practices that they have implemented and the policies, and how the policies targeting their management of the expansion of the graduate programs among their public universities. And this analysis will help us inform policy choices open to Texas. And the third task is a very important aspect of examining the benefits of the expansion of graduate programs in Texas is really to understand whether the current graduate programs are meeting the economic needs of the state as well as the nation. We will review various reports on strategic goals, labor market and occupation projections. We will also analyze specific data sets to identify occupations that have a need for graduate degrees, and of those occupations, we'll identify the occupations that are forecasted to or are projected to grow. Using the labor demand analysis, as well as information from the coordinating board, and as well as the advisory committee, we will select a handful of fields and conduct case studies. And for each field, we will interview relevant higher education stakeholders at the higher education institutions, as well as different employers, to examine the quality of the graduate programs, the type of students that are being targeted, the type of skills that are being developed, as well as job placement. We will also collect financial data from those selected number of institutions, higher education institutions, to estimate the costs and revenues associated to the programs of those selected fields. We will then utilize all the information and analyze all the information collected in the previous tasks, and we will collaborate with the coordinating board and also elicit input from the advisory committee to recommend ways to use the information about the labor markets and other information regarding benefits of graduate programs. And these recommendations will complement existing processes for preparing, reviewing, and approving graduate education proposals. Finally, we will interview higher education institutions in Texas regarding various policy options for managing expansion of graduate programs, as well as get information regarding the feasibility of these various policies. And we will triangulate this information with the information that we collected from the 3 other states. And based on that, we will identify principles to guide policy decisions regarding expansion of graduate education. And I probably do not need to say this, but like all research, the study has some limitations. But one of the things that I would like to highlight is that we will be collecting quantitative and qualitative data from various sources and stakeholders to ensure and increase the reliability and the validity of our results and consequently our recommendations.
Thank you, Rita. Let me brief you on our tentative schedule for the project. We're looking forward very much to your initial inputs today and ideas you have for topics that the study should consider or concerns that you have that you want to bring to our attention at this stage. We are planning to get together with you again at the very end of March or beginning of April. During the same week that the board's cause committee will meet and spend an extended session with you then here in Austin, give you some preliminary look at some of the emerging findings and themes from the early part of our research and engage in a discussion with you over some of the issues that have come up, other issues that you may want to raise. And we deliberately want to do that really right in the middle of our data collection and analysis process so that we really benefit from your input and engagement. We then will target preparing a draft report 2-3 months after that point, then have a period of, again, re-engagement with you, public comment, and so forth, with an aim of finalizing the report toward the end of calendar year 2016 and publish it in early 2017. The last slide we've got here shows you the email addresses for myself and Rita, and also for Alan Mickey as the key point of contact for you on the coordinating board staff. And we encourage you, as we've said several times, we're hoping to have a discussion today. We're looking forward to having an even more extended discussion with you in a few months. But we want to encourage you to contact us anytime with thoughts or comments, concerns, questions, or references to reports or materials that you think we should take a look at. And we certainly hope that you will reach out to us anytime you've got thoughts that relate to this study. So with that, I'd like to bring the presentation to a close, and we can transition to the discussion portion.
Okay. Charles, this is Candy Tayebi from Sam Houston State University, and I was wondering if you had received already the report from GAAC that we have done earlier this year.
This is Alan Mickey, the coordinating board. I have sent Charles that report. I'll make sure that, but this was several months ago, so I'll send it to him again with a reminder that that's what it is. So thank you.
Hi, Mark Shipman. Charles and Rita, I was wondering if you're here with the NSF survey of earned doctorates.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear the question. There was a little bit of breakup on.
I was just wondering if Charles and Rita are familiar with a survey of earned doctorates that NSF puts out.
Yes, we definitely are. We've used it in previous studies.
And the reason for my question is this, that as you look at the data, graduate education in the United States is still the most sought after education around the world. And so a good part of the applicants and admitted students to graduate schools throughout the U.S. are international students. And so our market is not just Texas or the nation, and I agree that we do need to meet the nation's and Texas workforce demands, but increasingly our students are coming over from overseas. And I'm just trying to understand how your analysis, as Rita walked through it, will actually include an analysis to meet the expectation that we will continue to provide graduate education to international students, which has positive benefits for the U.S. They may stay in the U.S. or they may return to their home country.
Thank you. That's an excellent point, and we have actually already started looking at some data about the awards, enrollment and awards to Texas residents, to other U.S. residents, and international students by program that the coordinating board staff has provided to us. And next time, we definitely will have that on our agenda. We're also thinking in the selection of the case study fields that we're thinking at this point that we probably can study approximately 6 fields during the course of the study, and so we may select a couple of the fields that have strong enrollment from international students, and maybe other fields that have stronger enrollment from domestic students, just so that we can kind of learn about what the dynamics are in those different types of fields.
Thank you.
This is Sunny Singh. I wanted to suggest that another useful resource might be, though it's going to be a little more specific to a subpopulation of doctoral programs, but that's the NIH Biomedical Workforce document, where they've done a pretty good analysis of where doctoral programs in the biomedical sciences need to go. They have specific recommendations on what the future biomedical workforce should look like to serve the needs of the nation. I understand this is more an activity specific to Texas, but I think there may be some useful elements in that we could certainly apply.
Thank you very much. We will definitely look at that. And I think, I just want to say we didn't overly emphasize this in our briefing, but we're very aware that different graduate programs in terms of discipline and level will have different target markets. There are some graduate programs that serve a very local labor market. There are others that serve a statewide, a national market, or an international market. And that's part of what we have in mind in Task 1, is to try to draw out what those distinctions are, so that as your institutions and the coordinating board is planning, you can have a kind of clear frame of reference for where each program fits into that local, regional, national, and international scheme.
Great, thank you.
This is Mohammed Abdurrahman. I'm wondering if you are also going to take a look at the access to minority students, of certain programs being available at regional universities and so on. Just specifically, the role of graduate education or regional universities in providing access, especially with a focus on the mission that they serve for minority students.
Thank you. Also a good point, and I think we're definitely interested in that. I think we need to refine our study plan a little bit more to see how we're going to actually incorporate all these issues.
Thank you.
A very general, this is Sunny again, a very general, almost philosophical question. I understand this is a 15-year strategic planning exercise that we're embarking on, yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the
I'm sorry. The question, I just wanted to make sure, this is the part of the initial steps associated with a 15-year strategic planning activity, correct?
Well, no, this is Rex, and I think the answer to that is somewhat.
Somewhat, did you say?
Somewhat, yes, because certainly we would expect that the graduate education strategic plan would fit, so to speak, with the overall higher education strategic plan. Whether the strategic plan for graduate education that emerges from the study and from our conversations with GIAC and coordinating board staff and certainly others when we get to the more public phase of this, whether that turns out to be a 3-year, a 5-year, a 10, or a 15-year plan is something that's still yet to be determined.
I see. That's actually helpful to know. And so I guess that kind of answers my question, because I wasn't sure if it was a 15-year plan, recognizing that times change and that kind of stuff, whether the perspective of the plan would be a little different than one that's a little more limited in its time frame. So it may address more longstanding policies and procedures that may be less labile as a function of economic upticks or downticks and other related trends in higher education.
Yeah, and I think that's a point well taken, because, in trying to anticipate any particularly sort of purely workforce need, then we all recognize that whatever we know today may be very, very different, not just 5 years from now. It may be very different 6 months from now, but it certainly may be very different over a 5, 10, or 15-year time span. So, but again, the degree to which we build in, and certainly going forward, we'd have to build in some review processes and that kind of thing. But I think that's something that we can talk about as we go along, and then even refine that even further after the study has been conducted and after we've actually created more of a skeleton for the plan itself.
Great. Thanks, Rex.
Okay, I have a question that I actually received from another graduate dean from the A&M system, and this was about how the board is actually going to continue to consider new programs during the period that the study is actually being conducted. Is this going to impact any of the new programs that's currently under consideration?
Well, in the short term, I think the answer to that is no, it won't, because we won't have any information from this plan to impact that. So at least for an unspecified period of time, it would be sort of business as usual, I guess would be one way to put it. But as the information in the plan unfolds, then certainly we might, especially if there's something relevant to program approval, then we will certainly take that into account. But that's also one of those things that we will also make sure that we try to vet as much as possible with you guys and with the broader graduate community at large.
Just a follow-up, I'm sorry for this one, was, I guess that same graduate dean was wanting to know what is going to happen in maybe the rush as some fields or so are being identified and universities are trying to capitalize on these identified fields or opportunities. Is there a certain procedure that you may want to consider, or you at least want to address that or keep it in mind, that there might be just a rush to submit programs in response to anything identified as high priority or so from the study?
Yeah, I think, and that's a point well taken too, because that may very well be some of the result. But I also think at that point then, it would be incumbent upon us as staff to make sure that we sort of follow the procedure we have, and then whatever adjustments we make to it along the way.
Thank you.
So this is Karen Butler Hurry. I had a question. I'm not sure if you've already developed this, but could you talk a little bit about maybe the methodology and how you will go at really trying to determine need? That is really very difficult for graduate programs. And, are you sort of, how do you, kind of take that mix of employer responses, versus also maybe, I guess, what kinds of education people have currently in the workforce. And so I don't know if you've thought about how you will, sort of get at, trying to determine the need for advanced degrees.
Very good question. What we have in mind is a general look at the occupational projections that the Texas Workforce Commission produces, which they update every few years, and they cover a 10-year period out into the future. We've already conducted some analysis in our previous work with the coordinating board looking at the distribution of degree levels by occupation. So we intend to use that to identify occupations that already have a substantial employment of graduate degree holders, and then look at the projected growth rates in those occupations. And we're planning for probably our next interaction, we'll have that data for you to discuss. So that'll provide a sort of a broad view of where the labor market is going that may be informative to graduate education. There is often not a one-to-one correspondence between occupational demand and specific degree programs. And so what we've learned from our previous work is that occupational analysis can provide a general guide, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what specific programs are going to be needed. So what we're planning to do in the study, as we said, was select about 6 disciplines to look at in depth. And in those disciplines, we'll talk to a set of higher education institutions that offer graduate programs in those disciplines. We'll talk to some employers who hire graduate degree holders in those disciplines. And we'll also look, where feasible, we'll look at discipline or field-specific information about workforce. And we already had at least one suggestion on this call about some analysis that's done for biomedical graduate education. There are also many of the licensed and regulated health professions have associations that collect data that's very informative. Some of the other fields may not always have such a centralized system, but we'll look around. And the idea is, by doing these 6 or so case studies, is we're hoping to develop a set of methods that can be used and can be replicated and extended to other fields. The idea is that we'll choose fields with somewhat different characteristics, so when you want to look at other fields, you'll have a model to follow and say, you know, here's the kind of data that you can bring. We do recognize that projecting future workforce demands is very challenging, and that often the data, while there is data, it doesn't clearly point you to a conclusion. And we're certainly well aware of that, and so we're going to try to balance the employer, the institutional perspective, and the statistical evidence to, as Rita said, try to triangulate. And I guess we'll see. I mean, part of this is a bit of an experiment through these case studies, is to see the level of precision that we can develop and what that implies for statewide planning and institutional planning.
I want to follow up on Karen's question. How about the self-employment? A lot of the areas that are rural, we're looking forward for entrepreneurs that actually can start new businesses. So I don't see that reflected in the workforce side. Is this something that you can recommend, ways to evaluate the potential for such?
That's a good point. I think that the workforce data does speak in a general way to those demands, because it is supposed to include employment by occupation, not necessarily only in firms of a specific size. But I know from the methodology that a lot of the data does come from firms, and so there may be concerns about how well the self-employed sector is represented. So we'll certainly think about that, and we welcome further thoughts on how we might get at that. One of the things that I think we know is a very important and interesting feature of graduate education is that establishing graduate education programs can be a spur to local economic development. And I think at least one of you alluded to that in that, there may be concerns about we have lots of foreign students coming, but that can also be an opportunity because those programs can lead to the formation of businesses and so forth in the areas around the higher education institutions, which can lead to economic development. And there's been obviously some work done on that.
Excuse me, this is Greg Maddox from Texas Southern. I wanted to ask about a broad question about the scope of this project. A lot of times discussions at the coordinating board and in GEAC tend to focus on doctoral programs in graduate education, and I'm wondering if this study is going to look solely at doctoral programs, or will it examine the breadth of graduate education offered by institutions in the state?
Thank you for that question. The scope of the study explicitly is to address all levels of graduate and professional education in the state. And so we're sensitive. And then when we think about the fields that we choose for the case studies, we want to make sure that we have fields that represent master's degrees, doctoral degrees, and professional degrees.
This is Mark Shepard. Coming back to the point that you mentioned about entrepreneurship and education can indeed serve as an economic engine. I want to think back to Sunny's comments about the length of time. And if we're looking at current work trends and existing jobs, what our hope, of course, is that by master graduate education that will create jobs in Texas. So the landscape is not dynamic, and so our hope is that there'll be more jobs, and so the demand for graduates will be even greater as time goes by. Charles, is there anything in the analysis that can help predict the impact of graduate education on jobs based on past trends that you can use then in your studies?
Well, I think this is a challenge, and this is also a topic we addressed in the previous work with the coordinating board on use of labor market information. The formal labor market information system is far better at describing what's going on with jobs that exist today than it is about predicting what kinds of jobs are going to emerge in the future. And we're having a very interesting discussion this week about one of the facts that we cited at the beginning of the presentation, and that is that your universities have closed and consolidated, on average, as many programs as they've opened over the past 10 years. And so the question is, why is that? What's driving universities to say, we don't need this program, or we can merge these programs, but now we need this? And a lot of that is changes in the need for skills in the workforce. So I'm not sure we're going to have a wonderful answer to this point. We're certainly sensitive to it, and we can certainly talk more about this when we meet next time, and sort of see where we can take it.
This is William Christonis from the University of Texas Permian Basin, and my area mainly is in education. And is there going to be a continual proliferation of online programs? Is there an emphasis or bias toward that online programs in the state of Texas?
Well, thank you for that. That's also a topic that we've been chatting about this week, because if we think of the study as advising you all on strategies that you could use to expand graduate education to meet workforce needs, clearly distance learning or hybrid programs is one strategy that enables you to do that. And so I think we want to cover in the study, we want to look at those programs, those methods of provision, and also look at more traditional face-to-face, and to talk about what the place of each of those modes of delivery could be in the overall system.
Well, I know there's, economic factors in generating, for online programs, but I deal with a lot of school superintendents in the Houston area and various places, and some some of the programs that are producing, like I know one program that's graduating about 30 students this spring and with doctoral degrees, and some of the employers really don't want to hire the people that are strictly online. They'd like to have a hybrid or a combination, but when it's strictly online, the employers are saying some of the candidates aren't prepared. So that's just getting down to the instruction component. So that's what I hear from some local school superintendents and principals.
Well, we'll definitely work that into our interview protocols with the employers and try to get some information from them on how they view the graduates from different modes of instruction.
Okay, thank you.
This is Joan Stannis Wallace. Do I have the floor?
Yes, you do. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In the presentation, Dr. Goldman had mentioned that they're going to study how to grow graduate education to meet the needs of the state. And then this is mostly then discussed in terms of workforce needs. Now, there was a mention that graduate programs spur economic development locally. So is this report also going to make recommendations as to how to spend a dollar, whether it should be in regional expansions or centralizing the graduate programs in one geographical location? So there's going to be they will be looking at disciplines, but are they also looking at the geographical distribution of the programs?
Yes, we're certainly hoping to shed light on that question. I don't know that it's within our power to finally answer a question like that, but I think we can illuminate what the values are that are served by locating institutions. Comment was already made by another colleague about access for various populations of students, so you can see certain arguments. We will try to lay those out as objectively as we can and at least provide a decision-making framework. That much we can offer to you.
Perhaps somebody else can inform me. Are there studies? I know there's studies about the cost of educating a student at each of the institutions, but has someone actually examined what that educated person brings to the economy, conditional on where they started?
The College Measures project does have graduate earnings, and we are planning to use that in the study. Those are not conditional on where the student started in the sense. Those are just what you learn from that is what the average earnings are of graduates from different programs, from different institutions. And so it's not a sort of counterfactual comparison, if I could use that word, between if I had a student go through here or had the same student go through there, but there may be some at least indicative information from that on what the economic benefits are.
Okay, and let me please clarify what I meant when I said conditional on where they started. Conditional on, for example, if they started in public housing project, housing with little access. So what would have been their path if they had not gotten through a college education? So a cost analysis of the burden of this person on the state if there had been different outcomes.
Well, we will definitely give that some thought. We're certainly planning to look at graduate earnings, and we'll think about what we might be able to say that's related to the sort of, the life path, the different life paths that potential students could take.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I'm curious about what your approach will be when thinking particularly about the arts and humanities. I mean, clearly, advanced study in those areas have to respond to market demand. Clearly, they should have, especially with some economic benefits that accrue either to the graduates or to the culture. But arts and humanities are themselves a little different. They have cultural and social values that, extend beyond, in some ways, an employer-employee relationship. And I'm wondering how your study will speak to the status of these disciplines that are somewhat different in their cultural impact.
Good question. And we certainly recognize that there are values beyond just getting a job that come from graduate education and research that's associated with it. I think we're going to put a lot of the resources into the disciplines that we select to focus on in our case studies. And so with 6 or so fields, we obviously cannot cover the entire breadth of everything that's done in graduate education. And so there may be some aspects that we just don't cover as thoroughly, but we certainly can consider whether there are ways that we can more briefly address some of those issues in our report.
I understand that. Part of the motivation for my question is that when universities are going to make hard choices, some programs will be sustained, some will grow, and some will be reduced. Understanding how particularly arts and humanities will fit into that growth or reduction model would be of some importance. The historic role of universities will be affected by the decisions we make, not only about STEM disciplines, but also about the arts and humanities.
Yeah, and I think you've raised a really interesting question, especially in light of the fact that, with the connection to the 60 by 30 plan, and particularly the marketable skills goal that's designed to try to recognize or really identify and elucidate, if you will, the marketable skills that students earn in a degree program, regardless of what the major is. I think that's an interesting thing, and as Dr. Goldman pointed out, we'll certainly look at that and see if there's a place to fit this into the study somehow, or what we can glean from that. But it does raise a really interesting point about the place of arts and humanities, and even to some degree social and behavioral sciences as we go forward. And my own personal opinion, being a social scientist, is of course that somehow we need to make sure that those programs remain because of what they offer to society as a whole, and what they offer to knowledge and to humanity. So you raise a really interesting question, I think, and it's one we'll certainly take into account and think about a lot more. And y'all might want to think about that some too. And then when we meet again, in whatever form that may take, we can have some further discussion about that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, any further questions?
I had emailed Alan. This is Matthew Capps. I was going to ask through this format, the presentation the representatives from the RAND Corporation provided, is it possible to share that with the GIAC?
Yes, Alan's going to send it out to everybody.
Great, thank you.
Right, there was a little technical glitch during the presentation. This is Alan. I apologize for that. Not all of the slides were broadcast while they were being discussed. So this broadcast will be archived, so you can listen to it again and follow along with the slides that I'll email to you. Or, of course, you can look at the PowerPoint presentation that they were referring to and collate that against your own notes. So that will be following shortly after we adjourn here. I'll send everybody out a copy of the PowerPoint presentation.
For what it's worth, there at about 10 o'clock this morning, there already was an archived version of this presentation on your site.
Yes, this morning, actually, there was a presentation at 9 o'clock that Charles and Rita gave, identical to the one that they gave to you, or almost identical, a few extra comments. That one is archived on the coordinating board site as well. So both of those presentations will be accessible. Later on, this entire conversation, complete with your question and answers, will be archived as part of our GIAC records. So any further questions? If not, Mohammed, would you like to adjourn the meeting?
Were you going to discuss about the next meeting time? I know it was mentioned, but do we want to just see if we're going to have, any thoughts about the date?
Yes, thank you. Charles and Rita will be back to make a presentation on their preliminary findings at the next coordinating board meeting, and that will be at the very end of March. Is it March 28th? Sorry, at the next CAUSE meeting,
right.
Committee on Academic and Workforce Success, which is March 28th, 29th. We'll check on that. But so we were going...
I think it may be because of spring break, it may actually be a little earlier than normal.
I think it's March 30th.
Oh, thank you, Charles. March 30th.
March 30th. So we were thinking the 31st or April 1st,
That's right. While Charles and Rita are still in town from California to make the presentation to the CAUSE meeting, the following day or the day after, they'd like to have an in-person discussion with GIAC so that we can really get into the weeds of what they found and look in depth at the findings. So we are going to send you a doodle poll for your preference of dates so you can check that against your own calendar. Perhaps March 31st, perhaps April 1st, perhaps April 2nd, and that will be our next face-to-face meeting. Charles and Rita will have a large portion of the agenda that day, but that will also be a regular GIAC meeting, and we can bring up all of the other items that we would normally discuss in a GIAC meeting. So keep an eye out for an email coming soon about your preference date for that next meeting, but it'll be end of March, early April.
Okay, well, thank you. So do we have a motion to adjourn then?
Moved.
Okay, we're adjourned. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much for joining us.
William Crittone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.